May 26th, Harris Township meeting. Call to order. We have no minutes to approve. Citizen comment. Amy, anyone sign up?
No.
Okay. I have two items. First, the good news is that Amy was given the position of president of the Pennsylvania Municipal Planning Association.
Managers Association.
Managers Association last week. So I think she told me this is the fifth lady that's ever run that organization. So we thank you for your dedication and effort, and good luck the next year.
Thank you.
And the second is a reminder that we lost DJ Liggett May 10th. DJ was a good friend of COG. I think she was the planner for Harris Township for a while, and all of us worked closely with her in the COG building. So she passed away May 10th, and so she'll be missed. Okay, announcement of executive session, Amy?
Actually, Denny, if you want to announce that you had an executive session, that'd be great.
Oh, okay. There was an executive session May 21st to discuss personnel issues. I had a conflict, so I wasn't out there. So that's about all I can say for that one. Okay, township business. Amy, item A.
Purchase of the mini excavator. This has been long overdue. The 2021 operating budget includes $95,000 for the purchase of the mini. The mini excavator will be used in our brush collection operations. We are recommending that the board approve the purchase of a Caterpillar 306 mini excavator from Cleveland Brothers for $81,100. Just one note, we are still in the process of trying to purchase a heavy duty trailer to use with the mini. We've been having some trouble locating one that has the right gross vehicle weight. So we're still looking for that. So you will see a request to approve that once we're able to locate one.
Motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Was
Does purchase of the trailer fall underneath the total of 95,000?
It should. The one we were looking at was about $13,000. So we should come in under budget.
was that a CoStar purchase, Amy?
Yes.
Good.
This
And we're
is
dealing
not
with-
going to only be used for brush. This is general purpose usage.
It is, but it's primarily going to be used for brush collection.
Why?
I mean, it's going to be used for other things as well, but one of the mini's main focuses is brush collection. After we had that storm in 2017, we had Patton Township's piece of equipment here for a while, and we saw how great it was to move the brush around, and it lessens your workers' comp claims and other things from brush collection, because brush collection is very labor intensive.
Well, if we're buying it just for brush collection, I question that, but this can be used for awful expensive just to collect brush. When we can contract that out if we have to. But
I mean,
I'm assuming this is going to have other uses. I mean,
yeah, it will. But I mean, it's also like the leaf truck, right? The leaf truck was $129,000, and that's really its only uses for leaf collection. So,
okay.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign? Okay. Item B, electricity contract for the township, Amy.
our electricity broker, Premier Power Solutions, was shopping our electricity needs. We're currently paying 0.04490 per kilowatt hour with Dynenergy Energy. This contract expires in September 2021. As you know, we're part of the solar power purchasing program at the COG, and they're starting the RFP process, or have sent out for the RFP, and starting the process to look into doing the solar power purchasing. So it was recommended that we all look at extending our contracts through the end of 2022, perhaps beginning of 2023, because we have to follow the school district. So I emailed you today the pricing information from the broker, and I would just recommend, so that this makes it a little bit easier for us with the solar power stuff coming, that we go with the 12-month from direct energy at 0.05533 per kilowatt hour. And that would run from September 2021 to September 2022.
Is some kind of motion on that, or do we
Yes,
need a signed
I need-
contract, or,
I need a motion, please.
okay. Someone,
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we approve the electrical contract for direct energy for 12 months at the net rate of 0.05879.
I'll
Second,
second that.
is that Nigel second?
Bruce did.
Okay, good. Discussion? I think it's sort of interesting with respect to what we're doing on the solar power purchasing agreement. The kilowatt estimated on that when it comes in 23 is 0.0375. So solar is going to be much cheaper than this 12-month contract. So we'll see what happens after that. Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now there. Okay, resolution 2112.
So this authorizes the submission of a Greenways Trails and Recreation Program grant. The master plan for Tussey Pond Park calls for the installation of 2 ADA accessible fishing piers around the pond. Since the park became ours in 2014, we've received a lot of interest from local groups to use the pond for fishing activities, including from a local veterans group in town. We feel it may be worthwhile to make this one of the first improvements in the park, particularly given the amount of usage the surrounding land is getting by families and mountain bikers. We're applying for funding through the state's Act 13 program, that's the Marcellus Shale program, to build the 2 piers. The total project cost is $32,000. We did some refining of the cost estimate. And under the program, we would be required to match 15% of that, which is $4,800. We did include $10,000 in the special project budget for parks related items in 2021. So if you're comfortable with that, I don't know if it's a long shot for us to get this grant or not, because we're in a county that doesn't have a lot of wells, and they look at your economic, if you have economic issues in your area, and we really don't. So I'm not sure, but we'll try.
Motion?
sure, I move to approve resolution 21-12.
Second,
I'll second it.
discussion. Not hearing any, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, item D, the Rallis subdivision component 1 planning module.
Mark, you can take that.
Todd, you doing that?
Mark.
Mark? Okay.
So Pentair Engineering submitted a revised Component 1 planning module for the Rallis subdivision, which the board approved actually at your March meeting and then again at your April meeting. This is for a plan that you've already provided conditional approval of, that it proposes subdividing a 30.26 acre property along Mountain Road into 2 lots. This module, as I mentioned, had been approved previously, but was denied by the Department of Environmental Protection both times. The DEP most recently denied this module due to the existence of an on-site privy. There's a porta potty that was on the property, which the Township SEO has now verified has been removed. So the board must again approve this module before it can be resubmitted to DEP. We've reviewed the module. We have no outstanding comments, and the SEO has approved and signed the updated module. It's our recommendation that the board move to approve resolution 2113, the planning module for the Rallis subdivision plan, and refer to the Department of Environmental Protection for approval.
Have a motion on the top of page 3.
So moved.
Second,
Second,
Okay.
I have a question. No question. You turned the sewer module down because you had a porta potty on his property?
DEP did that, yes. So
Because you had a
what
porta
happened
potty.
was the plan at one point had, or the property at one point had a small, we'll call it a cabin, or for lack of a better word, it was a building that was being used as a cabin that had a privy attached to it, is my understanding. That privy was removed, but then a porta potty was added, and DEP still considered that a privy. So they denied the module. That's my understanding. I know
And
John
did they
Sepsis-
think about calling up the company removing it, and it's as simple as that, or have to go through this whole thing again? Couldn't they just call and said, call up Robinson or Shawley, come and get your porta potty instead of going through the whole sewer module study again? Back in
I
6
think
months or
from
so?
DEP's perspective, they looked to see if it's in compliance and they said it wasn't, so they
There
denied
wasn't.
it. So,
Oh, my. Okay. Nothing
Other
else.
comments? No other comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Okay.
That was fun.
Rural zoning methodology map evaluation results. Mark, are you doing that one?
yes, so back at your April 12th meeting, the board had sent the proposed rural zoning map back to the Planning Commission for further discussion. The board specifically asked that the commission review the methodology that had been used to delineate the different rural areas, to review the proposed zoning map to determine if any changes should be made, and also to determine if the former Yoakum properties that are now owned by the Immels should be included in the updated agricultural district. So the Planning Commission discussed these items at both their April and May meetings. At their April meeting, staff provided a presentation of the designated rural areas project methodology and some of the background as to why this long-range plan was created for the township's rural areas. After their discussion, the Planning Commission reached consensus that they felt that the methodology was sound and asked that staff then bring the map back to them at their May meeting. At the May meeting, we provided the Planning Commission with a few areas that we thought they may want to look at based on some recent changes, development that had occurred since this plan was initially compiled. And we also provided them some information on the Yoakum request, as well as a proposal from Louis Glantz, who was representing Mr. Yoakum, who had recommended that they would be amenable to some changes to the proposed rural residential regulations. So we provided an analysis of what that would mean for the Yoakum property, former Yoakum properties, as well as other properties in the district. So after all of that occurred, the Planning Commission made their recommendations, which were sent back to the board. And basically there was a few properties, or I'm sorry, areas of the township's rural areas that they felt should be changed in terms of zoning boundaries, but they did not recommend that the former Yoakum properties be included in the agricultural district. I have prepared a presentation that was in your agenda packet. It's up to the board if you would like me to present it or not. It's simply going to provide more detail on what the Planning Commission discussed. And I'll leave that up to you. If you want me to present it, I'm happy to. And if not, that's fine as well.
Let's do the presentation, Mark.
Okay, I will go ahead and start sharing my screen and get this going. Okay, so what I'm going to do here with this presentation is give an overview of the designated rural areas methodology, which I mentioned was evaluated by the PC at their April meeting. I'm going to go over the Planning Commission's review of the proposed zoning map and some recommended edits, and also the Planning Commission's recommendations on the zoning designation for the former Yoakum properties that are now owned by the Immels. So a little bit of background on the designated rural areas project. And this is some of the information we provided to the Planning Commission. Back when this was all done, the Planning Commission members at that time were kind of dealing with a couple big things that had occurred both in the township as well as regionally. And not only that, we also have a lot of new Planning Commission members, so we felt it was good to go back and give them this background. So this designated rural areas project, which was a long-range plan, was conducted in 2014 and 2015. It was started shortly after the Planning Commission had completed a comprehensive review of all of the township's zoning regulations. We also had the 2013 Center Region Comprehensive Plan adopted. We had the CRPA published a regional review on zoning consistency, particularly rural zoning consistency with the comprehensive plan. And it also was around the same time that the Calvary Baptist DRI decision was rendered, in which there was a court case against the COG for not extending public sewer, which highlighted some zoning inconsistencies as well. And so what this plan does, it provides additional planning for the rural areas of the township that is consistent with the 2013 Center Region Comprehensive Plan. So the approach to putting this project together is that this was a planning effort. It wasn't an evaluation of how our existing zoning should be changed. It really was a blank slate approach where the Planning Commission did not look at the existing boundaries of any districts. They simply took and had staff prepare information that showed the rural areas and the features that exist there, including natural environmental features as well as development, particularly residential development. And what they wanted to answer with this plan was, where do we want to see future residential growth? Where do we want to see future non-residential growth? How do we want to limit the scale of anything, both residentially and non-residentially? And are there areas that are currently, or uses that are currently permitted in our rural areas that should be eliminated? Do we have uses that are not consistent with the intent of the rural character of the township or with the comprehensive plan? And the primary goal of all this was to keep rural areas rural and support rural uses in these areas. So the methodology that they used was recommended by a planning commission member, and it was based upon a similar study that was done in Lancaster County. We had to adapt it a little bit because Lancaster County doesn't have the steep slopes and the forests that we have here, but it was a very similar methodology. And what it is they studied the rural portions of the township, as I mentioned, as a whole. They didn't consider where zoning districts were. They just looked at the existing features, natural and environmental features. They looked at development patterns, both inside and outside of the growth boundary. And they also discussed the uses that should or should not be permitted in our rural areas. So as far as resources, they looked at a number of resources, and I have a list up here of some of them. It included everything from slopes to soil types to the locations of publicly owned lands, different water resources, and things like natural heritage inventory, where we have certain types of plant life and whatnot that are unique to this portion or to this area of the state. And then when it came to land use, the commission really looked primarily at residential uses, because aside from open space and farmland, residential is probably the second most common use of land in our rural areas. And we have a fair amount of residential development that has taken place over the years. And a number of these lots, developments were developed using the open space rural clustering regulations that the township adopted back in the mid-1990s. So the key evaluation findings of the designated rural areas project were that areas comprised of steep slopes contain, environmental and natural features that should be protected from development. So we didn't, those are areas that the Planning Commission doesn't want to see, being populated with homes and non-residential uses. We have prime agricultural soils and other resources on slopes that are less than 15%, and they're most likely to be impacted by non-agricultural development, which would typically take place in the form of residential structures. Residential concentrations exist outside of the regional growth boundary and sewer service area in places like Linden Hall, Shingletown, along Windmill Road, Bailey Lane, and Crestview Avenue. The majority of the rural areas within the regional growth boundary and sewer service area have been developed with large lot residential uses, several of which were established through the open space rural clustering regulations. Residential development at suburban densities exist really only in the Linden Hall and Shingletown areas, where it's very tightly developed. And then existing and future agricultural uses are most likely to exist in areas that are not comprised of large lot residential development. So, areas that are basically open, it could be farmed now, is where we're most likely going to see future agricultural uses, and also in areas where we don't have concentrated natural and environmental features, so not on our steep slopes, is where we would see agriculture. So the Planning Commission, as I mentioned earlier, they found that they felt that the methodology was sound and properly applied based on their review of, or their review of the methodology that was presented to them in April. They felt like the methodology was well thought out, and it was something they didn't feel necessarily contained any errors that needed to be readdressed. So if anyone has any questions on this part of the presentation, I'd be happy to answer them. And then I'm going to jump into those other two items that were discussed at the May meeting with the remaining items on the presentation.
Keep going, Mark.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Frank.
Just one quick question. Are there any prime ag soils on any of the properties ag now that we're going to change to rural residential?
Yes, there are prime ag soils throughout the majority of the township's non-sloped areas, I'll say. So pretty much anywhere here in the valley, you're going to find we have prime ag soils. So yeah, there definitely are properties that have been developed with residential uses, like in the rural residential district, that definitely have prime ag soils on them.
Go ahead, Mark.
All right, I'll move on to the next part of the presentation here. All right. Give me a second here. I clicked on the wrong screen. There we go. All right, so after the Planning Commission reviewed the methodology, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't actually finish some of this. I got a little lost in my own presentation. So one of the other things they talked about in April was how they went about defining these different areas. So, they did the analysis part, and then they went through, this is back in 2014 and 2015, they went through a process of creating different areas, basically looking where we had commonalities of land use types and in natural and environmental features, and they came up with these different areas. So the first one was, they felt like, areas where we have all these steep slopes and natural and environmental resources would be an area. The next area would be areas where similar land uses and development types are grouped together. So they looked at where we have a lot of residential uses, and that became kind of the rural residential area. And they looked at areas that were primarily open for farming or currently farmed. That was the agricultural area. And then they looked at the areas around Lindenhall and Shingletown, and those were the rural centers where they felt that they're very similar in terms of density. And after those areas were defined, they talked about defining an intent and purpose and appropriate uses that they think would fit in those areas. And the goal here would be that the existing character of each of these areas would be supported and maintained by new zoning regulations. So this natural areas district, as I already mentioned, it has all the steep slopes, very low development potential. Future development will be very limited by similar standards that reflect what we have in our current ridge overlay district requirements. The agricultural area was, contains lands with very low development densities. It's primarily open. It's primarily, at least flatter than the sloped areas. There's plenty of flat land that can be farmed. They felt that agriculture-related uses like agritainment would be appropriate here. It does have some natural resources that would be protected if land is developed with residential uses, and that would take place through the conservation design regulations that the Planning Commission felt were needed to help better develop these properties. If we're going to allow residential development, let's make sure the open space that we're getting is protecting certain resources and providing opportunities for farming in the future. Then this rural residential area, as I mentioned, was the boundary they drew that mostly contains large lot residential uses, including several that were developed not just individually, as lots, but actual developments themselves. Some of these developments were created using the open space rural clustering regulations that were adopted in the mid-90s. This includes Rocky Ridge, Laurel Hills, the properties now owned by the Immels, as well as the Hogan subdivision up off of West Main Street. These regulations would continue to apply to future residential development in this area. So the Planning Commission felt that moving forward, there's very limited development potential in this area, but what development potential there is should utilize these regulations. Agriculture, they felt, is appropriate here, but again, the potential is limited due to the fact that there's a lot of existing residential development. Most of this area has been developed, and the area is not really intended to promote additional residential development, but rather to maintain the level of development that currently exists. The regulations that the Planning Commission ultimately drafted for this area is, in terms of residential uses, it allows for the exact same residential density that our current agricultural district allows for. So the name rural residential does not mean that they were saying this area should be further developed with more residential. It's just that it is very much, I think, more a reflection of the uses that currently exist there. And then finally, the Rural Centers District, as I mentioned before, is primarily in the Lindenhall and Shingletown areas. And these are non-rural densities, obviously pre-exist our zoning ordinance. And the development potential in this area, these areas are very limited, mostly just to infill or redevelopment. And so, as I mentioned a little earlier, when I got a little out of order, the commission did review all of this at their April meeting. Their consensus was that the methodology was valid and accurately applied, and they agreed that the zoning map should be reviewed at the May meeting. And I will again stop sharing briefly in case anyone has any questions about the different areas that they identified through that process.
Doesn't sound like it, Mark.
I will share my screen again and move forward. So in May, the Planning Commission began their review of the proposed zoning map. And what they did is they focused primarily on the agricultural and rural residential district boundaries. They felt that rural centers and natural areas were pretty well cut and dry, but it seemed like where most of the questions were being raised is what should be agricultural and what should be rural residential. So what we did is we provided the Planning Commission with an updated map that shows the location of residential development in our rural areas. Again, we've had some development since the plan was put together in 2014 and 2015. So this allowed them to see some of those changes. Staff also identified several areas for the Planning Commission to review. And we also, encouraged them as well. If they had any areas they thought should be reviewed, they could mention that at the meeting. And then we did discuss the ML properties. Those were discussed separately. So I will go through everything but the ML properties in the next one or two slides. So this is the map that we prepared for the Planning Commission. All of the properties that are outlined with a darker border are residential lots. So you can see where those locations are. In this particular area here, we had some development and as well as down here that took place since 2015. So the Planning Commission was also given a map that showed a couple areas that staff felt should potentially be further evaluated just based upon the uses that exist there and their proximity to other zoning districts. And so what the Planning Commission did is we provided kind of a summary of each of these areas of the township. And then they went ahead and provided a motion on each to decide, or on all of these to decide whether or not the district boundaries should be changed. So what the Planning Commission recommended is that area number 1 over here, which is comprised of 2 open space rural clustering developments. So these are 2 residential developments with open space lots. But that area should be zoned rural residential to connect this portion of the township that would be zoned RR with this area over here that would be zoned RR. Areas 2 and 3 down here, the Planning Commission felt should remain agricultural. They didn't feel those should be included in the rural residential district. Area number 4 here, due to the fact it's a large 33-acre property that's being farmed and doesn't have any existing development plans that have ever been approved for it that we're aware of, they felt that should be changed from RR back to agricultural. And then area number 5 over here, which is just to the south of the ML properties, they felt that should be included in the rural residential districts. It accesses a private street here and is more or less used as a residential lot. So that was their recommendations, which I just provided you an overview via map. So does the board have any questions for me about the map review that took place and their recommendations on those areas.
One thing I'd like a little more clarification on is the linkage or lack of linkage with the open space, OSRC space, rural conservation, I guess, and our proposed RR or proposed ag. Is there a linkage there? Is it an overlay?
Is there a linkage? Are you asking if there's a linkage between what is developed as open?
It sounds to me the open space rural clustering is not a separate zoning area.
Correct. The open space rural clustering is a development option that currently exists in all of our rural zoning districts. What the Planning Commission felt as they were going through the planning process and ultimately the zoning process was that that development option should still be permitted in the rural residential district, since we have a large number of those already existing there and the development potential that exists in that district is very low. So it was really about trying to keep regulations in place that would apply to properties that have already utilized those regulations to be developed. There are going to be a few of those projects that are located in random locations in rural port areas of the township. There's just a couple of them. Not everything could easily be put into one district because you don't have residential concentrations everywhere. But rural residential is trying to capture the majority of those residential lots. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
That's getting there. Yes, thank you.
Yep. If there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and then and go through my slides related to the Planning Commission's discussion of the IML request, or the YOCM request for the IML properties. All right, so the former owners of these properties, the YOCMs, had requested the following: that their properties be included in the updated agricultural district rather than the proposed rural residential district. And as an alternative to changing the zoning designation, their solicitor, Lewis Glantz, had sent a letter to the board stating that they would be okay if the rural residential district was amended to permit current agricultural uses on properties of 10 acres or more. They also asked that maybe the criteria could also include enrollment in ag security and clean and green, but staff recommended that that is not necessarily a good idea from a regulatory perspective, since those are voluntary programs. It's probably easier just to go with a minimum lot size. So the Planning Commission had asked that, as part of this, that staff provide some information on this request and some more details on the second request, which was to, as the alternate, was to change some of the rural residential standards. So from our understanding, the purpose of this request is to, it wasn't necessarily ever articulated to say this is exactly why we want it, but agriculture is a permitted use in this district, but not all uses that are permitted in the current or proposed agricultural district would be allowed in the proposed RR. So it's our understanding as staff that the main reason that this request was likely submitted is that if it was zoned ag, other uses would be allowed that aren't going to be allowed under the rural residential standards. And those uses would be farm wineries, landscape contractor businesses, and agritainment enterprises. So that is those are the three uses that we looked at in relation to both of those requests to understand what impact either one would have on these properties. So as a reminder, the IML properties were subdivided by the Kissels in 2001 through the township's open space rural clustering regulations. The three properties, there's three properties in total. One is a 17.4 acre open space lot that contains 3 dwelling units as well as farm uses. There's a 5.3 acre and also a 3.4 acre residential lot, both of which they're considered vacant by the township. They've never had a use established upon them. Plan notes state that the lots may not be further subdivided. Any use of the open space lot must comply with the open space regulations, which are fairly limiting in terms of what can be done on that property. That's a 17.4 acre parcel. And access to these lots is provided via Nittany Meadow Farm Lane, which is a private street. The subdivision plan also prohibits access from any of these properties directly onto 322, meaning they need to utilize that private street. So in terms of development potential, the 17.4 acre open space lot does not have any additional, there's no additional dwellings that could ever be constructed on this property under our current regulations. As I mentioned, they currently have 3 dwellings on that property, and meaning they're non-conforming. Our open space rural clustering regulations only allow 1 dwelling. I believe those dwellings were in existence at the time the subdivision plan was approved. So this lot can also not be subdivided any further. It needs to remain 17.4 acres in size. And the uses of this property are limited to those that are permitted through the open space rural clustering regulations, including farming, 1 house, open space, or a public park. Those are basically the only uses that are allowed on that property under our current regulations. The 5.3 acre and 3.3 acre residential lots are limited to a maximum of 1 house per lot due to being along a private street. Private streets are only allowed to have 5 dwellings, and there are already 3 on the 1 parcel, so the other 2 would only be allowed to have 1 home on each lot. The 5.3 acre lot could have horticultural uses in the proposed rural residential district. They're not currently permitted on that lot based on our zoning, but that is one of the changes that's been proposed through the zoning update. And these lots cannot be further subdivided per the 2001 plan notes. So as a reminder, these open space lots, there's very limited uses that can be done on these. As I mentioned, we have a couple of these open space rural clustering developments in the proposed RR district, like Rocky Ridge and Laurel Hills and the Hogan subdivision, as well as the Immel properties. The open space lots for all of these developments are limited to the uses that are shown here on the screen, which again, it's primarily farming, including 1 home, just generally being left as open space or a public park. So the Yoakum properties, in terms of their request, was that they would be included in the proposed agricultural district, which is an update to our current district. In addition to the Yoakums, the Huntridge Manor Homeowners Association submitted a request that their property, which is an open space parcel with some stormwater facilities on it labeled as B, would be included as well. And Galen Dreibelbiss submitted an email to the township requesting that his property, it's a 2 acre parcel labeled as C on this map, would also be included. So the map on the right-hand side really, I think, encompasses the totality of the request here, which is that those 5 parcels would be included within the proposed agricultural district. So what I'd like to do is just talk about the impacts that would take place to these properties if they were rezoned and included in the designated, in the agricultural district. So for the open space lot owned by the Immels, there would be no change in the uses that are permitted. The uses that are permitted there would still be limited to what the open space rural clustering regulations permit. The same would be more or less true of the Huntridge Manor open space lot. This property's perpetual open space for that development includes a stormwater facility as well as natural and environmental features. And then the 2 residential lots that are owned by the Immels as well as the Dreibelbiss lot, those would then be allowed to potentially be developed with veterinary offices, boarding kennels, or dog training facilities. Those would be the only permitted use changes that would take place if these properties were included in the agricultural district rather than rural residential. So does anybody have any questions on that particular request? I have a few more slides for the request to change the zoning text.
Go on, Mark.
Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, sorry, this takes a minute. As I mentioned, there was a text amendment that was also proposed by the Yoakum's attorney, and that is that the rural residential district could permit all current agricultural uses on parcels over 10 acres. As I mentioned, we believe that that is likely to be referencing farm wineries, landscape contractor businesses, and agritainment enterprises, even though agritainment enterprises are not currently permitted in our agricultural district. I mentioned they had asked or considered that or requested that this could include a restriction on parcels that are eligible for clean and green or enrolled in ag security. Staff doesn't think that's a good idea. We'd rather just, if there's going to be changes made to text, we'd rather just be based on acreage and not on enrollment into these voluntary programs. And the proposal specifically stated they felt that this solution would permit the rezoning to go forward while at the same time enabling all current agricultural uses on large parcels. So we analyzed that to see what impacts there would be if the text was changed. So farm wineries were added as a permitted use in the current agricultural district in 2011. It's not considered an agricultural operation, but it definitely could be established in conjunction with one. We require 2 acres of planted fruit to be used in wine production. It's not permitted in the proposed rural residential district, but it is permitted in the updated agricultural and the proposed natural areas districts. And it's not permitted on open space lots established through the open space rural clustering regulations, including the IML 17.4 acre IML tract. So this map, the properties that are shown in that red color are those that could potentially be developed with a farm winery if the text were amended as proposed by the Yoakum's attorney. So as you can see, the majority of this development potential would be off places like Bailey Lane, Crestview Avenue. Some of those properties are being used as primarily as residential properties. We also have Mountain View Country Club and a few other parcels on the east side of the township. For landscape contractor businesses, these were added as a permitted use in the current agricultural district in 2012. This is not considered an agricultural operation, but again, it could be established in conjunction with one. There's no plantings of any type that is required with these uses. They need to have direct, the property that these are located on need to have direct frontage and access provided via a collector street or an arterial street. They're not permitted in the proposed RR district, but would be permitted in the updated agricultural district only. And these uses would also not be permitted on open space lots established through our open space rural clustering regulations. This map shows the location where these could potentially be established. And I will note that these 3 properties right here, the only one that I think for certain could do it without any new access would be this one here, the Fuller property, because it does have direct access onto a collector street. Both Mountain View Acres Mountain View Country Club and this property here along Bear Meadows Road, they both have access from a local street, but they do abut an arterial street and could potentially get access that way and establish the use there. So again, the use potential would be very limited. The last is agritainment enterprises. These are proposed as an accessory use in the updated agricultural district. These need to be associated with an active agricultural operation. They must have direct frontage and access provided by an arterial street. And this was discussed at length by the Planning Commission previously about where these uses would be appropriate, since we don't currently permit them and we're not quite certain what impacts there may be from them in the future. There's additional regulations that would apply. If this use was permitted in the RR district, the IML open space lot would not be eligible due to the fact they do not meet access requirements. So this map shows the potential location where agritainment enterprises could be established if they were permitted in the rural residential district. I will note that I think every single one of these properties would be unable to establish an agritainment enterprise at this point without getting a separate access onto an arterial street. So this is an open space lot from an open space rural clustering development, as is this one. This is Rocky Farm. Both of those, they have access via other streets that they would need to ask for access off of either 45 or in this case, 322. And then the other properties are very much in the same situation as we discussed earlier with landscape contractor businesses. So after reviewing the request, the Planning Commission recommended that the IML properties remain in the proposed rural residential district. The reasons for their recommendation were that changing the proposed zoning district of the IML properties, as well as the others that were requested, would not result in any significant benefits to the property owners. Existing uses are permitted. Existing uses on these properties are already permitted in the proposed district. The proposed text amendments outlined in the April 2nd letter from Mr. Glantz would have no impacts on the uses permitted on the Immel properties or the others that requested a similar change. And staff noted that if the township is interested in permitting additional uses on these open space lots that were created through the open space rural clustering regulations, that this would require more significant amendments to both existing and proposed regulations. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to go ahead and try to answer any questions that the board might have.
We have a recommendation on page 4, which is the beginning of the discussion. I would entertain a motion to accept that. Second, and then we'll do discussion for the supervisors and anyone else on board. So if someone would like to move that recommendation, please.
I'll make that motion.
Have a second? I will second that. And now we'll go to discussion. Supervisors first and then supervisor, we'll get to Terry. I see your hand poking up here. Okay, let's do supervisors and then we'll go around to everyone else. Colleagues?
What page? Is page 4 of our, wait a minute. I want to see what
We're losing you, bud.
and page 4 of our, yeah, okay. Okay. Go ahead. I found it now. I'll read it.
Okay. Frank?
I'll read it.
Frank and Nigel?
Oh. Well, I would prefer, I can go now, but I have some couple things. The motion, I'm not comfortable with that August 9th. I would sooner see that come to our July meeting. And the reason I say that, and I know, Mark, you're going on vacation, but we've had this for 10 years. You know, we've had this a long time. I don't think have you lost me again?
No, you're here.
Okay. I don't think we need another 2 months to go through that. I think the center region can get that done and get us back to us so that we could have a public hearing in July. I just don't understand why that's got to take 2 months. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two, I've looked at a lot of this, and I don't think this has ever been about the methodology. I think Mark's done a fabulous job on it and done a fabulous job of enlightening us in all this. But there are several things there that I don't think we are consistent on the methodology. For example, one of the first things on the methodology was prime ag soils and natural resources. Well, we've got the headwaters of Spring Creek on that one property. We've got ag land. We've got everything there, but that was kind of looked over to go to the residential, which, okay, fine. That's what they want to do. Then I look at Rocky Ridge. We put that in rural residential, and by rural residential's methodology, large lots. Would somebody please show me a large lot on Rocky Ridge? I think that's high density development. That is not large lot development. So again, I don't think we're consistent there. So I really want this to go. I want to pass this tonight. I want to make it go, but I don't think that's the end of it. I think it's the end of getting this up and going, but I think we need to revisit this map and apply our methodology consistently. The only thing I've seen that I've heard on the property we're talking about is we don't like landscape businesses and wineries. That's the only thing I've heard. And I don't know why that it is. And I know it's over here out of the way and all that, but I think if the methodology is applied to what we have, and I think we all agree with that methodology, I just don't think we're looking at it objectively. I think we're looking at it more from whatever. So my point is I would like to go ahead with this, and I don't have a problem approving that motion as long as we can move it up to July.
Nigel?
Well, I don't really see the rush here. I think there were some good reasons spelled out that it would be scheduled for August and not July. So the Center Region Planning Commission has sufficient time. You can't just say, okay, we want it back like then. So they'll only have possibly one meeting. probably only one meeting. And this gives them the possibility for two. I also just looked at everything. The whole thing just seems to make sense. And there's open space in the rural clustering areas. And so there is ag potential on that open space property. It makes sense. And, it's not necessarily a really large ag portion, but it is permitted in the rural residential, and that'll keep that open space and keep the ag use. And again, this particular property that keeps coming up, it just there's no benefit because of the restrictions on the property already to switch it from ag to rural residential, to not switch it and keep it ag. There's just no benefit at all. It's the same uses will be allowed the way the property is now. So I just don't understand the issue here. The methodology is sound. I think we should go with it.
Bruce?
In terms of the date for the public meeting, I would defer to Mark. If Mark thinks that we can get it through Center Region in time for that date, then that's good. If we can't, I don't see any need to rush into it. So I'm on the fence on that. It's whatever for me. It's whatever is practical. And I think that, look, we've this has been around for a while. We sent this back to the Planning Commission. We asked them to do a thorough review. Staff in the Planning Commission went back through it all again. I don't see any reason to second guess them.
Okay. Bart, did you get Unfrozen?
Sir?
I read it. You're right. I'm not sure. I'm with Frank in this in a way, but you're right. There's not a rush because we've been working for years, but delaying it another month is kind of, it kind of drags things out. But I guess if they think we need that time to get the input back from everybody, I guess then that's what we have to do. I have a three-part statement here, actually. When we sent this back to Planning Commission, I don't know that I was sort of thought they did a great job. They've reviewed it. They've gone through this. I didn't know we were going to ask them to reevaluate all of this stuff. I think that we've done a good job, and the RR makes sense. Uh-oh.
Bud, you're frozen.
He's not having a stroke, is he?
With our steep slopes and our mountains, I just wish there was a little more protection on our mountainsides and steep slopes, because we've got no roads that are compatible to any development up in that area. And we're going to hear from at least one of those streets very vehemently before too long. And I hope that we can protect development on the sides of the mountain up there, because it's becoming a very hot item. It's one of our last places to build. Everybody likes that high view, likes that high area, and I do too. But I just hope that we on that slopes we're protected, because none of those roads that up there are any good for any more traffic, and without doing something serious about it.
Bud's frozen again.
Frozen again.
A question one. I looked at the map. And something has come up on Route 45 where Pavon's Power Equipment is. There's a little niche there. I'm not quite sure what that is zoned. Is it commercial now?
Yes.
You were talking about.
Yes,
Mark?
it's zone commercial. I think it's been zone commercial probably since the 1970s, Todd.
Well, 69 is when he moved up there. Now, that's a little niche in there. Can that stay? That looks like it's almost zoning, but will we be asked to move that, change that, or anything with the sale of that property?
Well, you could certainly look to change the zoning on that at some point. I think Center Region Comprehensive Plan has always showed that property, at least since I've, in recent years, it's shown it as a commercial parcel. It's been planned to be commercial because it was an existing commercial use. So I think if you wanted to look to change that zoning, I wouldn't necessarily think it'd be a good idea to say just because it's selling, you can't just change the zoning
Well,
district. You'd want to plan for it.
what I'm saying is that the seller will be protected, that will can remain resident or commercial, even though it's bordered by all other zones.
Yeah, unless the township decides they want to change it, it would stay commercial.
Okay. So that was a little worry that I had also. My second point is, I am in favor of keeping this agriculture for a very simple reason, very simple reason, two simple reasons. Number one, the property owner requested it. And I think that we should honor a property owner's request unless it's egregious or unless it's really out of step, out of side, the spot zoning, illegal zoning or whatever. I'd like to honor the property owner's request on that. And I've heard many argument, and I haven't heard an argument why we should. We know that it fits in RR. I agree with that. But I've not heard an argument. I read through here said that if we keep that agriculture, it's going to cause a lot of problems. And I've not found out where it has. I know our concern is agritainment. And from what I can get between the lines, we're concerned that probably fall under agritainment, and we don't. Maybe that's what you don't want to see. I don't know. I don't have a problem with it because I don't think it's conducive to any type of roadside stands or anything along there. So, but that to me is important. It's been a farmland, and it's not too often. And I said this before. People come to us, the township, and say, "Hey, I want to keep mine as a farm." We always hear that. I want to retire. I want to develop. I want to develop this into land. And we've always been priding ourselves in being a very rural, outside of our growth boundary, very rural area. And I know the argument's going to be nothing's going to change. And he's going to have all this stuff. But if that's the case, I would like to honor his request to keep it agriculture. And I don't see anything on there that says we're really creating a big problem. There's a couple of little issues, I guess. But I do not disagree with the finding of the Planning Commission that it fits into that category. It doesn't mean it has to be in that category. So that's one reason. And the other reason is, and then this, we've gone over the years, put ourselves backwards trying to do open space. Then you were in charge of going around with those farmers, preserving their lands for open space outside the areas. You were in charge. We have an ordinance right now that we can purchase open space if we want to. So we are very pro open space, and to me, and I don't know if somewhere along the line someone must develop it, we would have definitely control over it. If it's RR, we have some control, but not much. So there we are.
Why do you have to call Comcast?
It might have to do with this piece of property, and they make piece of property illegal. Is that legal? I mean, for instance, I'll give you a real broad example.
Bud, you're frozen again.
You're frozen again.
Turn off.
Farm, the Dale Farms. They're all farms. What if Coach Township said, "We're all going back to agriculture"? And oh, by the way, Mr. Stalker, you have a car dealership there. You're illegal. Is that legal to do? And I don't know if we're doing that in this same case, but it seems to me we're taking a person's farm. Well, it's broad term farm, but it's still agriculture. We're saying we don't think this fits agriculture. We're changing you. Is there legal ramifications on that? I don't know if anybody can answer that right now.
Well, but we've gone on to supervisors. Mr. Williams popped his hand up before. Let's go to Pat Williams.
But I'm in favor of keeping agriculture.
Oh, wait, Bud's still talking.
Oh, did he freeze again? Or not?
I'm done.
Okay. Okay, Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here tonight representing the Immels, who now own the property that in the paperwork that you're looking at is the Yoakum tract. And just a couple points about it. Yes, it has agricultural uses on it. Yes, it has Spring Creek in the middle of it, or what passes for Spring Creek, at least in the fall and the winter. And it has prime agricultural soils. It's small, but it is a farmette. It's got multiple houses that were built prior to the inclusion of zoning in Harris Township. It has a barn, which was constructed in 1843. It has been the subject of a subdivision plan, which Mark referred to, and I have a couple comments about that down the road. The point is that the current zoning is agriculture. You're preserving the existing zoning. And when you rezone it RR, then you raise certain consequences. Some of the consequences that affect the Immels are that you included as permitted uses in RR some agricultural uses, but not all of them. And as a result of that, you have limited what the Immels can do with that property. As Mark has pointed out in great detail, in order to do something like agritainment, there are a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through in order to get the property, the access, and comply with those standards. But the one point that I would disagree vehemently with Mark is that the fact that it was subdivided and nothing was done with that subdivision plan does not foreclose the owner of the property from coming back and recombining those.
Yep.
But that's a battle that we have to fight down the road. But it becomes an impossible battle if the supervisors rezone this to RR. When I listened to the Planning Commission meeting, we looked at a map which Mark has in his carefully prepared materials. And I think it's to the right of one that he had up that shows these parcels A, B, and C. A, of course, is the Oakham property. B is the open space that's attached to Hunt Ridge Manor. And I see Dr. Hanlon is here. He also sent you a letter expressing the request of that group to retain it as agriculture. And Mr. Dreibelbus, who owns the small parcel C, has also requested that it be retained as agriculture. That area borders a farm. So when I hear the Planning Commission, and absolutely no disrespect, it's just their comments that, well, that looks to me like it's gerrymandering. Well, wait a minute. If you look at your zoning districts, they aren't all in very careful, constructed straight lines, as Mark has designed with that area of the agricultural zone. Well, it might be a nice thing to do, but it's certainly no requirement of any zoning district. The one that I find particularly troublesome is when I hear the designation of spot zoning. First of all, spot zoning is a judicial canard. It occurs when the courts need to find some reason that they don't want something to happen. In other words, if you don't like a zoning proposal, then it's spot zoning. If you do like a zoning proposal, well, then it's sound and rational planning. But it is not spot zoning to retain the zoning of these three parcels as agricultural. It then becomes a problem for the owner, that is Mr. and Mrs. Emmel, figure out what they can do. And even I think at this point, from having talked with Mr. Emmel, I don't think he could express a clear picture to you of what he wanted to do. But you are foreclosing him from exercising some of the things that he might be able to do, assuming he could comply with the other township requirements under the agricultural zone. Not to belabor the point, but changing the zoning does not appear to make a lot of sense. And as a result of that, on behalf of the Emmels, and parenthetically, I suppose with that, the people at Hunt Ridge and Mr. Dreibelbus, we would request that that area be retained as agricultural and let the chips fall where they may as to what else may or may not be done with the property. There is no argument about Mark's methodology. It's very thorough, it's very complete. And I don't share Mr. Glance's concept of adding additional uses to the RR zone. That has a whole lot of other things that you take into consideration, which I think Mark has addressed. You've got to look at what else might be affected by that. But the fundamental right to maintain a historical farm property as agriculture seems to be the most important thing for the zoning consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Planning Commission, we'll get to you right away, Mr. Planning Commission, Bob and,
Chris,
yeah, let's start with Mr. Aguirre.
Bob?
I'm just here. I'm just kind of observing to see how
Oh, okay, okay.
everybody's thinking on this. It's just a casual observer fly in the wall. So I'm just seeing this thing through.
Chris, from Planning Commission perspective, everything to add?
I would just say Mr. Williams' argument is very compelling. And the geography, if you will, the planning science behind the, Mark's analysis and the Planning Commission's analysis is also very compelling. So this is a very interesting puzzle. And I have no more comments.
Okay, Mr. Hanlon, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I ask one question before I make my comments? I'd like, and Mark probably can answer this.
The floor is
Mark,
yours.
how many parcels that you're proposing going to RR are over 15 acres large?
Over 15 acres in
Yep.
size.
Yep.
I'm going to take a guess here. I'm going to say probably no more than 4.
Okay, well, we know 2 of them, right?
Maybe 5, because I forgot with the new change, the Hessfield properties. It's probably 5.
Okay. So, I've sat on all these Zoom meetings with the Planning Commission as well as supervisors, and I sent all the supervisors an email on Monday. I hope you all had a chance to read it. I look at this, and first I'll represent Hunt Ridge Manor, and I don't understand the reason to change the retention area we have there and the 17 acres along 322. It can't be built on. I did hear Kent Baker talk about, well, it's traditional for a retention pond to be a retention area to be with the subdivision. Well, that doesn't mean it has to be. And one of the things I will say, having listened to everything, I thought the methodology was very sound. There's no question about it. But I happen to agree with what Mr. Harden said, and that is because the methodology was sound, the application of the methodology can vary. And I heard in a couple of meetings ago, well, if you agree with the methodology, you can't change the map. That made no sense to me at all. The other piece I heard was, I remember when your solicitor, Mr. Finelli, was on, and there was a concern. And if you go back and listen to what he said, I think what was mischaracterized by people after that was, you really can't, if you're going to keep that methodology, you really got to be careful about changing things. I think exactly the opposite. I think the application of the methodology is where the question will really become, how you applied it on the map. Now, you need to understand, my house is adjacent to Mike and Tara Immel's farm. I'm right behind them in Hunt Ridge Manor. And I keep seeing this thing on there that says, the notes say in 2001, when the Kissels subdivided, that no further subdivision could occur. Which meant, I believe, that you all are saying that it can't be subdivided and it can't be combined. I will tell you that in 2006 and 2007, within those 2 years, and I can give you the exact date, the Yoakum property was altered because I did it. I own the property at 642 Roslyn Road, plus the 3 acres behind me when I bought it. My wife and I bought it from Ron Gilligan and Missy Grauer. When Scott had the property, there was a very strange line that came up in the middle of our yard on 642 Roslyn. So I paid Pantera to come in, and Scott gave me a piece of property that leveled off. We went through the entire process, filed it with the court, never had a question from anybody about it. I also changed the entrance to my new property at 640 because I wanted to make sure I had the frontage I needed for my new property when we built the house at 640 prior to selling my property at 642. So your plan notes may say nothing can change, but the fact of the matter is legally, it has changed. So that plan note you can throw away because it obviously has been changed. So when I look at this, here's my concern. I work in the borough, in the township. I own a business in the township. I live in the township, and I love this township. You have a family that bought a property that want to maintain it. And all I see is, and I hate to say this, but please don't be offended, I see government wanting to change it, and I don't get it. So I strongly believe that not only should you leave the Hunt Ridge Manor property alone, but I really believe you ought to leave the now Immel tract alone because of allowing them to utilize their property. So I appreciate your time. I'm very concerned about it as a citizen, and I hope you'll make the right choice. Planning Commission did a great job. Mark did a great job. I disagree with how the mapping was done, but ultimately, gentlemen, you are the people we elected as our supervisors. So I'm basically asking you as our elected officials to take a look at this and seriously consider a change. Thank you.
I look at the recommendation and says if the board is comfortable with the rural regulations and zoning map as revised, a public hearing to consider possible adoption of the regulations to be scheduled for August 9th. The proposed regulations should also be sent to the Center Region Planning Commission for review and comment. We need to zero in on whether we want the meeting on the 9th. What do we send to the Planning Commission, Center Region Planning Commission? Mark?
Well, I would certainly be forwarding them a copy of the complete regulations, which you've previously looked at your March meeting. And then ultimately I need to include with that a proposed zoning map. So they need to be able to provide comment on both the zoning map and the proposed regulations at the same time.
So is the crux of our decision tonight the date of the hearing?
Well, I think here, the thing is, this evening, if you folks come to an agreement on what, if you're happy with the way it's proposed or you decide to make changes, either way, tonight's decision will allow me to put it on an agenda that has to go out tomorrow that will then put it on their June meeting for the CRPC. They will most likely not have a July meeting. They typically don't. And I won't be present if they do. So it would then have to go to their August meeting for them to have a second look. And the reason we had planned to have them look at it over a 2-month period, and we did not think that this would be done this late in the year. We expect it to be done back in March, is that it's a large ordinance. I mean, we're asking the Center Region Planning Commission to take a look at something that's very lengthy. It's a comprehensive rezoning, so we wanted to give them adequate time to be able to review it and then provide comments on it after having some time to look at it.
So right now we have 2 supervisors that want to retain agriculture and 3 that are interested in rural residential.
Well,
Where
let
do we go to the Planning Commission then?
let me chime in here, and that's one thing that bothers me throughout this process is we have not heard anybody speak. We heard our property owners here suggest that they want to stay agriculture. We haven't heard anybody else speak on the other side in terms of our residents. And I think that might be the purpose of having the public meeting, the public hearing. So I kind of in favor of moving through the public hearing, not having 100% made up my mind, though I've told you which way I'm leaning, but in terms of getting an opportunity for other people to weigh in so that we have a full set of information.
So can I just interject?
Go ahead, Amy.
we went through this process and we started with public sessions in, what was that, Mark, 2015?
We
Or
had
was it-
sessions in 2015, 2017, and 2019.
And when we did those sessions, we sent letters to all the property owners that would be impacted by whatever we were proposing. And we broke it down so that it wasn't like this, you came and it was this big session that you had to sit and listen to a presentation and maybe didn't have time to process. We had members of the planning commission there. We had storyboards, which are still sitting in our meeting room. And we walked folks through the changes and asked them to provide us with their feedback. We tried very deliberately to ask the public for their input because we knew this was going to be a big deal. And we knew we were proposing things that were going to be a big deal. Mr. Yoakum was the owner of the property at that time. And we went back and found the mailing labels when we mailed the letters to him about the meetings. So the public has had a lot of opportunity to comment on this. My one caution is I don't want to see you put this up for a public hearing when you're not 100% certain what you want to do, right? I think you need to be like 95% certain, because if we put it up for a public hearing and then you decide to change the mapping that night, we have to go back and re-advertise the public hearing, because that's the way the MPC, the state law works on this. I can double check that with the solicitor, but I'm almost positive that's what we would have to do, because you'd be making a change.
Does the fact you had a communication with residents in 2019, Terry, does that meet the currency
No,
of a potential zoning change? We need
No,
to be, we need to be more relevant in time, do we, than we can 2 years?
no, you can't. So under the MPC, and I appreciate Terry, but he's not your solicitor in this situation. He's representing a property owner. And he's a resident, a nice resident. But under the MPC, what we have to do, because this is a comprehensive rezoning, we don't have to send out letters to every property owner, because our solicitor said, because we're comprehensively rezoning, and that's what the section of the MPC says. But we do have to go out and we have to post the boundaries with signage that explains what we're doing. We have to provide notification, all of which we can do. You know, we'll do our e-newsletter, we'll do our social media, we'll do our website, we'll make sure everything's posted. We went through this when we adopted the Historic Resources Overlay District. We had to post that area as well. And we also did, because that wasn't comprehensive, we did send letters out to affected property owners as well. So, and we will get some feedback from some folks who will call. And we've been very deliberate about trying to make sure that folks knew that this was being discussed. Everything's been on either CNET or our YouTube page, including all the planning commission meetings. And this meeting will be on our YouTube page tomorrow. So we've tried to keep the public as informed as possible. I appreciate Bruce's point, and I think it's a good one. I think we want the public to make sure we're informed, but I make sure they're informed and have an opportunity to provide feedback. But I would also say, I think they've had an opportunity to provide feedback, and barring something happening at the public hearing, I don't know that you're going to hear from a lot of other folks. We did when this first came out, when we first put it in the e-newsletter a couple months ago, when we were talking about it for the March meeting, I did get questions from folks. What are you planning? Can you send me the information? We have all of that on our website and sent everything to everybody with the reports and everything, so folks could read it, and we answered questions. And, you know, a lot of folks were like, oh, it's not really changing for my property. It's not really impacting anything. I would say the concern we've heard, you know, obviously Dr. Hanlon and the Immel, now former Yoakum, now Immel property, those were kind of concerns that we've heard. So just some 2 cents, maybe 10 cents on this. Bud has his hand up.
Bud is waking up now, Bud.
I guess I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Like the one person I heard who was definitely against keeping this ag was a member of the planning committee. Everybody else I've talked to have all said, why not keep it agriculture? I've talked to 2 other farmers. I've talked to citizens, other citizens. I talk to a lot of people for some reason, and I've not heard any of them say we should change it to RR. They said, geez, now they're uninformed. I agree. They haven't been through this process like we have, but their comment has been, why would you change it from agriculture? So I don't know. We have another meeting in another week or so, don't we? Can we, I don't know what to do here on this. I'm in favor of keeping it ag, but I don't know what that would work, or how we're going to reach that consensus, or how we're going to decide it. I don't know.
I got, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I just have one question for Mark or whoever could answer it. If we approve this motion the way it stands, when it comes back for public hearing or it comes back, can we still change the map at that point? Or are we locked in that we can't? In other words, I would like to get this forward. I want to see the ordinance get through everything so we can get it into law. But I really still think that we have to, I'm just not comfortable changing that from ag to rural residential. So that's just me. But again, I want to get it done. So, and I like the methodology. I like the ordinances. I like everything. I just don't know that we've applied everything correctly on that map. And so my question is, if we send it to the CRPC, are we locked in then after that?
No, just like with any ordinance, when you have a public hearing, you can certainly change something in the ordinance or in this case, the mapping. However, what I need to double check with the solicitor, and I'm almost positive, because you'd be making a change to the mapping, you'd probably actually have to re-advertise and have a new hearing in September, the following month, to take action on it. But again, I will double check that with the solicitor. But no, you could certainly still change the mapping and you could make changes to the ordinance if it came back. I mean, I think what the language in the law says, if it's a demonstrable change, something that's going to have an impact, you certainly need to then re-advertise it for another hearing. But again, I will check that with the solicitor, double check that.
And the public hearing has impact with more than the Immel property.
Yeah, it's the entire township. I mean, and that,
Yeah, and the fact that we're sort of zeroing into Immel as a separate piece, I think is confusing us with respect to how that applies to the other pieces that may be changed.
I have a question. I'm sorry, you can't see my hand, Amy. I know the first week in maybe the end of March, I made a comment, I think at a planning commission meeting, and I brought a chart and submitted it in reference to the current ag, the proposed ag and RR, and Mark and Todd were going to come back with I'll use the word, a chart with the new definitions and everything that was explained. And I haven't seen that completed, number one. In reference to your comment, Amy, about everything from the 17, 18, and 19. But since March of this year, I know there was one or two things that were verbally changed, and that was retail farm sales on RR. Mm-hmm. And I made that question, and I was currently ag, meaning the property that I did own, that I couldn't have any retail sales. And I said, so no sweet corn or pumpkin sales. And then you come back and change that a little bit. So a little bit has changed here and there with different questions coming up, but I still think we have to go back before any public hearing meeting for the planning commission and for the supervisors and for the administration, so everybody knows what you can do and what you can't do, instead of verbalizing all this and like this, so we have it all in ink.
Mr. Yocum, those changes were made and are in the document now. Anything that was changed through those discussions that the board agreed to was changed and are in the proposed zoning ordinance document. The chart that you talked about, Mark actually put together a memo for the Board of Supervisors, and we can send it to you after the meeting, where he went through the permitted uses in our existing ag, the permitted uses in our proposed ag, the permitted uses in our proposed RR, and the permitted uses in our proposed open space rural clustering regulations. So he did do that and provided it to the Board of Supervisors. And I believe we also gave it to the Planning Commission as well last month. Yes. Or last meeting.
Well, there again, the Planning Commission didn't see it before their meeting, nor the general public who asked for it out there. So I'm sorry it's such top secret information out there, but you should have submitted all that out there to everybody, Amy. I won't get into an argument. I know it's a long night, so I'll sign off. Thank you.
Amy, is that the material on page 7 and 8 of the yellow?
Yes, and the Planning Commission was provided with, yes, and the Planning Commission was provided with almost the exact same memo at their meeting this month. So they did have that information, and we'll send that to Mr. Yocum after the meeting.
I found that very useful today as I was reading through it, so.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to move something here. I'd like us to vote on the motion. And with that, I'd also like to propose that we have maybe our second meeting in June to have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and hash this out with all of us sitting in the same room or whatever, and get to where we're all comfortable with what whichever way we're going to go that we're all comfortable with. Because I think this back and forth between them and us it's productive, but I think I'd like to connect that, I think is the best way to say that. So
Well,
that's what I would like to see happen.
within the motion is the date. I think the follow-up with the two people getting
I'll be
together.
fine with that. I'll be fine with that date. I was the only one that's expressed something different on that date, so I'm fine with that.
We have a motion and a second to proceed with a public hearing August 9th. Period.
I think we need to move forward with this. I'm not afraid if we change our mind at the public meeting to delay it a bit longer. There's no reason to rush into this. So let's just try to get it right. And I know which way I'm leaning, but I'm leaning.
Okay, so I would ask for a vote on the motion and a second that's on the floor. All in favor of proceeding August 9th meeting, signify by saying yes. Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Bud's napping.
August 9th, did you say?
Yeah, for the
Correct.
public hearing.
Okay,
Are you okay with that?
yes.
I think that was unanimous.
5-0.
Yeah. And we can follow up then with you're leaving town in 2 days, Mark?
I leave town in just a little over 2 weeks. So I
Okay.
will be gone from June 12th until July 3rd. This
We
was
give
something
you
I
that
planned.
much
Well,
vacation.
I'm sorry.
We give you that much vacation. Come on.
I've saved it up over several years, Frank, and I've never asked for more than a week off at a time. And going to take my kids to the national parks. So
They do have international.
Well,
parks.
you will come back, right? You will come back.
on July 3rd, that's the plan.
Okay. Are you sure you're coming back?
With
the
with
plan.
that vote, Amy, what other decision or discussion do we need this evening?
Nothing. I mean, Frank mentioned a joint meeting, but
No,
given,
That's sort of auxiliary to what we talked about tonight.
yeah, so let me just ask one other question. We had given you a legislative intent section that basically just laid out the methodology and how we arrived at the zoning districts and what the zoning districts are called. That we were proposing, you did this with the riparian buffer ordinance. So we were just proposing that, putting that in the front of this ordinance so that future township leaders will know why we did what we did. Are you okay with that proposed language that we sent to you? That was the other question.
Is
Yeah.
that's this document?
No, it's the B team made the agenda packet because the A team was on vacation that day, and that would be me. And so it was at the back of the ordinance and it was the same color. So I tried to rip it apart. It didn't look well.
Okay.
It says section 1 legislative intent. That's what it says.
Okay.
Uh,
Thank you.
It's not a trick. It's not a trick, is it, Amy?
What?
It's not a
I'm not
trick,
sure-
right?
No, there's no
Okay.
tricks. There's no tricks in local government.
And I have something I do need to go over tonight. So
Oh,
we
yeah,
got another
something-
item
I wanna do
we
this.
talked about.
Today we had I had my next meeting on the State College Area Connector, and there's some interesting things that they propose coming very soon to theaters near you. There will be a map of that area with every conceivable issue that could come up through that land, whether it's bat caves or historical sites or social economical sites. So that will become available to all of us to look at, and you can just click on it. It shows you the spots on it. But anyway, that's coming. Oh, by the way, the only thing that isn't on there is archaeology sites because they're not allowed to be on there. So I don't know why that is. But what we talked about, what they went over today was they updated us on where we're at with the alternative programs. And I want to go over how the system works first, because that'll make it easy to understand the other ones. Basically, the first thing they will consider with the alternatives is, does the alternative meet the purpose and needs? And if it does, it can move on. If it says no, then it goes to what they call a parking lot, which will sit over there and could be a future project, because like they said, no matter which one they pick, it's probably not going to fulfill all the purposes and needs. So there will probably be other projects that go on down the road. Like, for example, we can get everything done, but we can't fix this one intersection. Well, that intersection may be on our project in the future. Once it goes through level 1, level 2 is when they look at they assess it with a quantitative, how will it improve? How much will it improve? And then once it passes that, they say, yes, this is going to improve it, and it moves to the next step. Or if it doesn't, it goes to the parking lot to be potential future project. Once it gets to the B part of level 2, then it actually starts engineering design. They put numbers to it, and then they compare the numbers to everything that's going on. With that being said, the 6 concepts that they're looking at are pretty much the ones we've heard. And the only reason I'm talking to you tonight, because they told us we have to have our comments in by the 10th of June, which, if you know, we don't meet before then. But I looked at this, and I'm not sure we need to make a whole lot of comments. Most of this right now is pie in the sky stuff. I mean, the alternatives are looking at can and can't be made, but there are 2 alternatives that I think as a board of supervisors I've identified that we need to X right now and put our thoughts of doing that. Number 1, the very first one is no action, no bill alternative. In other words, they don't do anything. So I think as a board, we have to let them know that is unsatisfactory. We will not accept that. There will be something has to be done. So the first one I would like to have your consensus on is to say, we don't want that one. The rest of them are all 4 lanes and stuff like that. The other one that they have on there is number 5. And I want to do that one because we all know why we've been in this. They have number 5 is transit alternatives, adding CATA fixed routes throughout the study area. We all know by now how CATA can just get rid of those routes. So I want us to express that we are not in favor of any transit alternatives because we don't have control over when they can put those routes in and get rid of them. So other than that, the other 4 or 5 are all building roads, not building roads, build 4 lanes, build traffic circles. So all that can happen. I'm not concerned with that, but those 2 struck out at me that as a board, I think we better let PennDOT know we aren't even thinking about considering those alternatives. So I just wanted your feedback on it tonight so we can do that.
In relation to the letter we sent, I think in 2019 of staying away from Harris Township, both of those are counter to that, aren't they?
Yeah, they're part of the purpose and needs, Denny. They're in the purpose and needs. If you look, in other words, when this map comes out, I would encourage everybody to get on that site and look at it. And to be quite honest, the only places that comes down through there that you don't hit something is the current road. I mean, if you look at every other where there's either agriculture areas, security areas, there's streams, wetlands, animals, you name it, it comes down through there. And there's hardly any way to come down through there. But I would say that I can't guarantee it's not going to come through here, but I think there's better ways to do it. And we will have more shots at this, Denny. Once they come up with the alternatives, we're going to have, I think that's in June. I think we're going to be able to see some of that. And definitely this summer, we'll be able to have comments on what the alternatives they're proposing. So that's when we want us to talk about this.
What was the letter that we signed given to PennDOT and the engineer?
Yes, that was in the purpose and needs. Yes.
Yeah, it's
What
in the
we said is in the
document.
purpose and needs. Yes.
Okay.
Bud has his hand up.
Oh, Bud, okay, he won't come again. Bud?
You're muted.
Bud.
You're still
Bud,
muted.
you're muted. Oh, there you go.
First thing I want to make a comment, Frank. I have a collection of Indian arrowheads if anybody wants them.
Oh, good Lord, don't say that in a public meeting, Bud Graham.
Now,
You want to throw them around there or what?
now the other question is, the first one you said was, that was the first purpose?
No, wasn't the purpose. The first alternative is no action, no build. In other words, do nothing. Just leave it the way it is.
Absolutely, leave both roads the way they are.
Everything. No changes at all.
Well, I think, Frank, they're being very kind to you. You know that's not going to happen.
I know that, but that's why I said let's just tell them we don't
Okay.
want it.
And then the last one was the transportation.
No, it's the transit option, Bud. And what the transit alternative would be is they would increase the amount of bus service by CATA in the region.
Why is that even being brought up?
Again, I just said I want to tell them from our standpoint that we don't want that. The 2 I said are what we want to say.
My question is, why is it being brought up?
Because it's one of the alternatives.
Why is it being brought up?
Because it's one of the alternatives they're considering. But it is one of the alternatives.
Instead of rebuilding
yes.
road.
Yes, it's part of the alternative.
But I think they look at all the alternatives under this study, right? And so that would conceivably be one of them. It's not saying that's going to be the one.
Well,
but
it doesn't make sense. Well, they put buses instead of building a new road? Is that what they're saying?
For the most part, that would be one of the
Okay.
things they would talk
Okay,
about.
that answered my question.
In other words, I want us to, as a board of supervisors, to write in our responses to them by the 10th of June that those two alternatives will be totally unsatisfactory to us.
Can you and Amy work on that and make sure we get it in draft?
Yes, we can do that.
Maybe if we do that, we do it by the weekend?
Should be able to. I've got something. Well,
Oh.
Amy's cringing. How about by next Wednesday?
Can we do it by next Wednesday would be amazing. I gotta get that grant out. the
Tuesday,
door by
Wednesday's
Friday.
fine.
Okay. Yes, we can do that.
And the 10th is, what day is the 10th?
10th is I'm trying to think. The 10th is like a Wednesday, the following Wednesday, I think, isn't it?
Wait, I'm
Thursday.
looking.
No, it's the following Thursday. The 10th is a Thursday.
Thursday,
Okay.
yeah. So we could get it out the door by the 4th to them. I mean, it goes electronically, but if we get it out the door by the
Electronic,
4th.
can't we, Amy?
What'd you
Yeah.
say?
They don't need hard copy.
No, they do everything
Okay, okay.
electronically.
So we get it done, we can ship it right away.
Yep.
We'll look then for something draft form Tuesday.
Yeah, so you're by consensus agreeing that you're okay with taking
no,
that
that's
position. Did you hear me?
The business for the good of the order. Thank you, folks. Have a good day. Be patient. We'll work this thing out. And we're going to get done before 11:15 tonight too. So
Thank God.
don't laugh, Terry.
No, sir, I'm not.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.